What if the reason you slowly stopped playing guitar, stopped working on your car, stopped doing the things that once made you feel most like yourself was because someone made those moments of joy feel dangerous? Picture this: you walk past your guitar every day, it's leaning against the wall where you left it 3 months ago, gathering dust. You used to pick it up without thinking. Now you glance at it and feel that familiar knot in your stomach. The mental calculation starts immediately. Do you have time? Will there be questions? Will she sigh when you mention it? Will tonight be the night she brings up all the things you should be doing instead? Or maybe it's the shed, the tools still hanging where you left them, the half finished project covered by a tarp. You remember the excitement you used to feel planning a weekend build. Now you rehearse conversations in your head before you even mention wanting to spend time out there. You practice explaining why it matters, why it's worth the time, why you deserve to do something just for you. And somewhere in that mental rehearsal, you realize you're asking for permission to be yourself. That creeping sense that your hobbies are somehow selfish, that your passions are getting in the way, that wanting something just for you makes you a bad partner. You start second guessing whether it's worth the hassle, whether you deserve that time, and slowly the things that once lit you up begin to feel like guilty secrets. That subtle erosion happens so gradually that you don't notice your world shrinking until there's barely anything left that belongs to you. That's the topic of today's episode. We're going to explore how minimizing and controlling hobbies works as a form of psychological abuse. We'll start by defining what this tactic really is and why abusers use it. Then we'll break down three specific ways your interest can be controlled or undermined. We'll look at the particular impact this has on men and why it's so hard to name when it's happening to you. And finally, we'll talk about how to protect your autonomy and reclaim the parts of yourself that have slowly been carved away. For those of you who are new here, this is Stand Again, a lived experience platform for male victims of family violence. Abuse is not limited to one gender, but this channel focuses on the male perspective because it's so often ignored or misunderstood. If this content helps you, please like, subscribe, and type the words Stand Again in the chat. Those two words might just help another man find his. Minimizing or controlling hobbies is a form of psychological restriction, where your personal interests, especially those outside the abuser's control, are discouraged, ridiculed, or blocked entirely. The control disguises itself as concern, as practicality, as shared decision making. But underneath the reasonable sounding questions and suggestions lies a deeper agenda, making sure your world never extends too far beyond the abusers. Hobbies and personal pursuits represent independence. They create joy that doesn't rely on the abuser. They give you time away from the relationship and a sense of self that exists beyond service to the abuser. For someone who needs control, that independence becomes a threat. Your guitar isn't just a guitar, it's an hour they can't monitor. Your woodworking isn't just woodworking, it's pride that doesn't come from serving the abuser's needs. Your weekend ride isn't just exercise, it's space where you exist as yourself beyond the role they have assigned you. At first, you think you're being fair, mature, responsible. You tell yourself that compromise is healthy, that checking in is considerate, that maybe you were spending too much time on yourself anyway. You begin to police your own interests, weighing every moment of personal joy against their mood, their needs, their approval. You become the enforcer of your own shrinking world. But later, when you wake up to what's been lost, the grief hits differently. You realize you weren't being mature, you were being trained. Trained to believe that your joy was selfish, that your passions were secondary, that asking for time to be yourself required justification. You start to grieve the parts of yourself you abandoned, the projects left unfinished, the skills that went dormant, the version of you that used to light up when talking about the things you loved. Let's look at three specific ways this control manifests. Each one has its own signature, its own emotional fingerprint, and its own way of making you question whether your needs are valid. The first is permission framing. Permission framing is agency erosion disguised as partnership. Your hobbies become subject to approval, even when they should be entirely your choice. The control sounds reasonable, even considerate. You didn't check with me before planning that. Did you want to run that by me first? Do you think we can afford to be doing that right now? The tones suggest collaboration, but the underlying message is clear. Your autonomy requires their consent. This tactic turns you into the enforcer of your own restrictions. They don't even need to say no outright. They just have to make proceeding without permission feel like betrayal, selfishness, or poor partnership. You begin seeking approval for activities that should not need approval at all. You want to spend Saturday morning working on your car, you mention it casually, and you didn't think to ask if I had plans first? You hadn't realized you needed to ask. You start to explain, you then backtrack, you apologize, you suggest another time, and you notice that other times require the same permission, the same negotiation, the same sense that you are asking for something you don't deserve. You plan to join a local hiking group that meets on Sunday mornings. When you mention it, you hear, "You're committing to something without talking to me about it first." The question carries weight. Suddenly, your interests feel like a unilateral decision that impacts the relationship. You find yourself explaining why you want to go, justifying the time, promising it won't interfere with other things. You're seeking permission for personal fulfillment. The erosion is gradual but complete. You start checking before making any plans related to your interests and your hobbies. You rehearse how you present your hobbies as beneficial to the relationship rather than just something simply that you want. You begin asking permission to be yourself, and eventually asking feels too exhausting. So you just stop wanting things that might require an extensive negotiation. Next is emotional invalidation. Emotional invalidation targets the meaning your hobbies hold for you. The activity might be allowed to continue, but the joy is systematically stripped away. Your interests are reframed as immature, indulgent, pointless, or even embarrassing. If you feel pride, you're made to feel silly. If you feel excitement, you're made to feel like you are childish. Your emotional investment in the things that once nourished you become a source of shame. Ridicule is efficient. They don't need to forbid your hobbies if they can make you feel foolish for caring about them. Your enthusiasm becomes the target. Your passion becomes evidence of your immaturity, even when it is not. You learn to hide the things that bring you joy, then to feel guilty about having them, then to question whether they're worth defending at all. The phrases land with surgical precision. You really care about that? Wow. Followed by a laugh that makes your excitement feel absurd. It's just a hobby. Don't act like it's important. When you try to protect time for something meaningful to you, you're obsessed. It's weird. When your face lights up talking about a project, they dismiss something meaningful with phrases like, "It's your little thing," or "your latest phase," as if your interests are temporary distractions rather than parts of who you are. The daily reality becomes exhausting. You stop sharing your victories because the response deflates them. You stop mentioning your interests because the eye roll or smirk or little laugh that follows makes you feel ridiculous. You start editing yourself in conversations, filtering out the things that spark joy because you've learned that your enthusiasm makes you a target. And slowly, you forget what it feels like to be genuinely excited about anything. The third is deprioritization of hobbies. Deprioritization is control through endless delays. Your passions, in words at least, might be acknowledged as valid or even important, but they're always pushed to the end of an ever growing to do list that you must complete. The framing might sound practical, responsible, maybe even fair sometimes, but there are always more urgent, more necessary, more worthy things for your time and attention that you must do right now. And somehow what you love never quite makes it to the top. This tactic uses your own sense of responsibility against you. You want to be a good partner, a provider, a responsible adult. When they point out the laundry, the errands, the things that need to be done first, you agree. Of course, those things matter. Of course, you should handle your obligations first, but the obligations never end and your joy keeps getting pushed to tomorrow. Here's how it unfolds in daily life. You mentioned wanting to spend Sunday morning on your hobby. Sunday, but we haven't cleaned the house this week. So you agree to clean first. But cleaning takes longer than expected. Then there's lunch to prepare, then errands that somehow become urgent. By evening, you're too tired for your project and Sunday is gone. Or maybe you try to protect your time more clearly. I'm planning to work on my bike Saturday morning. The response comes gently. Saturday, I was hoping you could spend some time together. We've both been so busy this week. And the guilt feels immediate. You want to be present in your relationship, you want to be available, so you postpone. And somehow the time you postpone for them gets filled with chores and obligations and practical tasks that benefit the household but never refill you. The emotional impact compounds. You start to feel selfish for wanting time that is actually yours. You begin to preempt the resistance, postponing your own interests before they can be questioned. You tell yourself it's the wrong time, but the wrong time stretches into weeks, then months, then years. Your tools gather dust, your projects remain unfinished, and slowly you forget what it feels like to prioritize your own joy. When you're a man whose hobbies are being controlled, the damage goes far beyond lost time. It strikes at the core of how men often connect with themselves and find meaning. Men are frequently taught that emotional expression flows through doing, creating, building, mastering. Your workshop is not just a space for projects, it's where you process stress, work through problems, and reconnect with your competence. Your guitar is not just an instrument, it's how you express feelings you might struggle to put into words. Your weekend rides are not just exercise. They're where you find clarity, space, and a sense of freedom that recharges everything else. When a partner mocks or controls those outlets, they're attacking more than your schedule. They're undermining the ways you've learned to be emotionally healthy. For many men, hobbies are the primary space for authentic self expression, for pride that comes from personal achievement, for connection to who you are beyond the roles you play for others. Culturally, men are rarely encouraged to do something purely for the joy of it. Hobbies are usually expected to be useful in some way, like learning a skill or fixing the fence or mowing the lawn or building something practical. From a young age, the message is that your time must be spent on producing, providing, or achieving something. Anything else is framed as indulgence, even laziness. That conditioning makes the erosion of hobbies and abuse especially dangerous. When your small outlets are mocked or blocked, you do not immediately see the harm. You tell yourself you're just being responsible, that real men don't need play. But what's really happening is a slow destruction of your spirit. Without space for joy, you are reduced to nothing but a provider 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, stripped of even the most basic human right to spend 1 hour just creating, relaxing, and enjoying life on your own terms. The isolation compounds everything. Men struggle to rebuild networks that support their interests. We're taught to handle problems internally. When we do try to explain what's happening, it sounds trivial from the outside. She doesn't like my hobbies feels embarrassing to say out loud. It doesn't capture the systemic erosion of identity that's actually taking place. The response you get often makes it worse. Just tell her you're doing it anyway. As if it's that simple. As if the emotional warfare at home is something you can just brush off. Cultural ridicule silences men who try to name this abuse. Society shrugs at complaints about hobby control. You're told to grow up, to focus on what matters, to stop being so selfish. The message is clear. Your things that bring you joy do not deserve protection. Your interests do not merit defense. And slowly you start to believe it yourself. When your hobbies are under attack, the tools you reach for depend on where you are in your journey. What helps when you are inside the abuse is very different to what helps once you've broken free. If you're still in it, the first thing you want to do is at least protect one outlet quietly. You don't need to defend it or announce it. Just keep one thread alive that connects you back to yourself. Maybe it's 20 minutes with the guitar before anybody wakes up, or time in the shed after work. You need one small corner that hasn't been surrendered yet. Second, keep a private record. Note the comments, the interruptions, the way your hobbies are questioned. Write down the exact words and how they landed, not for confrontation, for clarity. It reminds you that this is a tactic, not a failing in you. If you're free of the abuse and it's time to rebuild, then you first need to rebuild with care. Pick one or two hobbies that make you feel most like yourself and bring them back. Do not overload yourself. Don't try to fix everything at once. Start with the things that remind you you are you still underneath. Second, choose your circles wisely. Old mates, families, men shed in Australia, hobby groups. The right ones will steady you. The wrong ones can pull you off course. Early on, stay tactical. Surround yourself with people who understand where you have been and won't turn your pain into bitterness. Later, when your footing is stronger, you can widen that out. When you are finally free from hobby control, the world opens back up in ways you may have forgotten were possible. The first time you pick up that guitar again without glancing over your shoulder, without calculating whether you've earned the right to play, without bracing for criticism, the dust comes off those strings. Your fingers remember the chords. And for the first time in maybe years, you play just because you want to. Recovery looks like rediscovering what makes you who you are. It's the pride in finishing a project for yourself with no one to impress or justify to. It's a shock of remembering that your joy does not need permission. It's watching your hands work with tools again and feeling that old satisfaction, that connection to competence and creation that no one can take away from you. You start to remember who you were before you learned to shrink, the version of yourself that got excited about new techniques, that lost track of time working on something you loved, that felt genuine pride in mastering a skill. Those parts of you weren't selfish or immature. They were essential threads of your identity that someone else convinced you to cut. If you're living with hobby control right now, know that your interests matter. The thing that brings you joy is essential part of what makes you human. Your need for autonomy, your creative expression, for time that belongs just to you is valid and necessary. The voice that tells you otherwise, that makes you feel guilty for wanting moments of personal fulfillment, is leading you away from yourself. This is Stand Again, lived experience platform for male survivors of family violence. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice might just help another man find his. If you're looking for one on one support, you can book coaching with a member of the Stand Again team. Simply visit standagain.com.au, where you will also find grounded information on surviving and recovering from family violence as a man. As always, remember that no matter how many times you've been knocked down, you can stand again.